After years of planning and working through my blood, sweat, and tears, I'm retiring early at 35 while the smart, golden child of the family aka sister is just starting out after years of assuming her smartness will earn her everything on a platter. Now my parents think it is so unfair for their darling daughter to work so hard, so they're forcing me to split my money in half with her so that she can get a kickstart. Growing up, my sister was the clear golden child in our family. She had the grades, the charm, the attention. It was like she could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. She was the straightest student with big dreams while I was the hard worker. It's not that I wasn't smart, but I wasn't what my parents called naturally gifted. In their minds, her intelligence was going to take her places while I'd need to put in the work, and honestly they weren't wrong about the work part. My sister was always told that her smarts would earn her everything she wanted, like life would somehow lay out a red carpet for her. I, on the other hand, was on my own. After high school, I went to a public college nearby and worked jobs while studying, saving as much as I could and keeping my head down. I didn't rely on my parents to cover my bills or tuition. I made it work, taking on night shifts, tutoring, and even doing some freelancing to make ends meet. Those early years taught me a lot about budgeting, self-discipline, and independence. Lessons I'm grateful for now. I also started reading up on personal finance and investing. Once I graduated, I landed a job in tech. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. And I threw myself into it, climbing the ladder while my friends and coworkers were getting new cars, upgrading their apartments, or going on vacations. I kept my spending in check. I maxed out my 401, opened an IRA, invested in a mix of stocks and index funds, and learned to live way below my means. My motto was always, if you can live on half your income, you're halfway to freedom. That mindset got me through a decade of work, and it paid off. As my portfolio grew, I started to see that early retirement wasn't just a pipe dream, it was a reality within my reach. Around the time I was working hard to save and invest, my sister was on a very different path. She attended an elite private university, one that came with an equally elite price tag. My parents were thrilled about it. They'd always dreamed of seeing her in an Ivy League-like environment surrounded by future leaders and big names. They proudly paid nearly all her tuition and covered most of her living expenses. For them, it was a chance to see their golden child fulfill her potential, and they didn't want her to have any financial worries along the way. My sister, of course, was happy to accept this support. She was used to the idea that my parents would take care of her, and she didn't think twice about the expenses involved. After college, my sister landed a high-paying job, which gave my parents even more reason to believe their investment would pay off. They expected her to climb the ladder quickly and keep that promising momentum going. But things didn't go quite as planned. She changed jobs frequently, often chasing the next big title or trying to find an opportunity that would align with her lofty expectations. Despite the high salary she earned, she never seemed to find her footing. There was always something that didn't sit right with her. Either the job didn't meet her standards or she felt she was being overlooked. So she'd leave confident she'd find something better soon. My sister's lifestyle was another part of the equation. She made good money, but she spent even better money. She rented fancy apartments with views of the city skyline, updated her wardrobe with designer suits, and always had the latest tech gadgets. She lived like someone at the top of her game, even if her career wasn't quite as solid as she wanted. She even started a business at one point. I'll admit I admired her ambition, and I could tell my parents were hopeful that she'd finally found her big break. But within the first year the business tanked. The debts from it left her reeling. Credit card bills, vendor fees, unpaid salaries piled up quickly, leaving her with financial burdens she hadn't anticipated. Despite the setbacks, my parents were always there for her, ready to help whenever she hit a rough patch. When she was behind on rent, they'd cover it. When she needed extra cash for a new apartment after her business failed, they stepped in. And whenever she faced an emergency, they bailed her out without question. In their eyes, she was still their prodigy. Someone with all the potential in the world who just needed a little more time, a little more support, and maybe a few more chances to get it right. Each time she stumbled, they believed it was just a temporary setback before she would inevitably make it big. Meanwhile, I was steadily building my own life and financial future. I wasn't earning as much as my sister, but I was cautious with my money. I lived modestly, saved as much as I could, and invested wisely. After years of steady saving and investing, I finally hit my goal. At 35, I realized I'd saved enough to retire early. I had reached the point where I didn't need a paycheck anymore. I could finally choose what I wanted to do with my days. It was a joy and relief that I could barely put into words. I'd worked so hard for this moment, and to finally be here felt like a dream. I decided to share the news with my family, thinking they'd be proud of what I'd accomplished. My sister congratulated me, but my parents' reaction was strange. They offered polite smiles, but I could tell something was off. They quickly changed the subject, and I chopped it up to them, just needing time to process it. I figured they'd come around eventually, but things didn't go that way. Shortly after, I noticed small subtle comments here and there, mostly from my parents. At first they'd mention in passing how everyone has their struggles or how families should be there for each other through thick and thin. It was odd, but I brushed it off. I didn't think it was directed at me or my financial situation. But then the comments started getting a bit more direct. They'd bring up my sister talking about how she was working hard and how she was still a prodigy with great potential but had just faced some unfortunate setbacks. They've mentioned that not everyone has the same opportunities to save or that not everyone has the same luck with money. I tried to ignore it, but the hints kept coming and it started to feel like they were building up to something. One evening, after a family dinner, my mom finally came out with it. She told me they were worried about my sister, mentioning that she was stressed about her debts and that it was keeping her up at night. She said she just needed a little help to get back on her feet. She didn't come out and ask directly, but she hinted strongly, saying how fortunate I'd been with my career and my investments and that maybe, just maybe, I could lend her a hand. I told her politely that I'd think about it, hoping that would end the conversation, but it only fueled their efforts. Over the next couple of weeks, my parents kept dropping hints, each one stronger than the last. They'd mentioned how unfair it was that one child would retire young while the other was still struggling, or how if one family member succeeds, they all succeed. It was becoming clear they thought I should split my savings with her or at least loan her a substantial amount to get her on her feet. They figured since I wasn't working anymore, I wouldn't miss the money and could spare some for family. The more they talked, the more it hurt. I realized that to them, my hard work wasn't really worth celebrating. It was just a pool of resources they could tap into for my sister's sake. They saw my success as something I could share as if I owed it to the family. But this wasn't some windfall or inheritance. This was the result of years of living simply, sacrificing and focusing on a single goal. I hadn't asked them for a penny since I left for college. My sister, on the other hand, had relied on them at almost every turn, yet they still expected me to be the one to bail her out. Now last night my dad called and laid it all out. He said they thought I was being selfish for not offering to help my sister. They said the family was supposed to be there for each other, and since I was clearly well off, I should want to make things easier for her. They even threw in the old line about how they'd raised me, put food on the table and sacrificed so much to get me to where I am today. Wasn't it my turn to give back? I felt myself breaking down a bit after that call. They were asking me to choose between my future and their approval, and it was tearing me up inside. I'd always respected my parents, and in some ways they had sacrificed for me, though never in the way they had for my sister. They'd given her advantages I never had, but still they'd done their best. They'd done what they thought was fair. Was I now supposed to repay that by giving up the life I'd worked so hard to build? I'd worked for so long dreaming of freedom, of breaking the cycle of working just to survive. I dreamed of having time to volunteer, travel, maybe start a passion project. But now I was asking myself, am I being selfish? My parents raised me, they provided for me, taught me discipline and encouraged me in their own way. Even if it was different than how they treated my sister, should I give her the leg up she needs simply because she's family? It's a hard choice, and even now I'm not entirely sure what's right. Update 1. Hello, everyone. I wish I could say that things have improved or that we're closer to finding a solution, but, unfortunately, the situation has only gotten more frustrating. A lot of you suggested that a one-on-one conversation with my parents might clear the air and help us reach some understanding. So after that phone call with my dad, I made plans to visit my parents and have an honest, open conversation with them. I wanted to approach it calmly to see if they could understand my perspective if we spoke face to face. When I arrived, things started off fairly normal. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. And for a brief moment, I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could have a rational discussion about this. Eventually, I tried to steer the conversation to the main issue. I told them I understood why they sympathize with my sister and that I could see how, as her parents, they would want to help her. But I also explained how hard I'd worked on my own to reach this point of early retirement. The moment I mentioned that I'd done things on my own, my mom's face immediately changed, and she didn't hesitate to interject. She told me that they'd done their part in raising me and that wherever I was in life, it was because of the foundation they provided. Her tone made it sound like I owed everything to them, as if all the years of hard work, the sacrifices I'd made, the countless hours I'd put in didn't matter because in her eyes they were the reason I'd succeeded. I tried to clarify that I wasn't disregarding their contribution or the role they played in my early years, but that the last 17 or 18 years were a result of my efforts alone. I explained that I'd given my all to reach this point, and in doing so, I'd neglected other parts of my life, including my marriage. I wanted this break not just for myself but for my wife too, who had been incredibly patient and supportive throughout my career. But none of my words seemed to resonate with them. Every point I tried to make was met with resistance. They seemed to have an answer for everything, and it was clear that their minds were firmly made up. They suggested I could work a few more years and then get back to my retirement plans. They made it sound so simple, like a small inconvenience that I could just push aside. But for me, it wasn't just about working a few extra years. I'd already given so much of my life to this goal, and I finally wanted to take a step back and enjoy what I'd worked so hard to build. I was hoping they'd see that, but they didn't. What really stung though was when my mom said that if money was such a big issue, my wife could work more. She implied that if we were struggling financially, my wife should step up and take on more work so I'd be free to help my sister. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a slap in the face not just to me but to my wife, who had been a constant support through all of this. The suggestion that she should now bear the financial burden to support my sister felt unfair and honestly deeply insulting. At that point, I couldn't hold back my frustration. I asked them why they weren't stepping in to help my sister themselves if they were so determined that she needed support. My dad's response was that they would help if they could, but they had debts of their own and couldn't afford it. It was as if they saw me as an extension of themselves, someone who should fulfill their financial obligations when they couldn't. They seemed to feel entitled to my hard-earned money simply because I was their son and I'd managed to build something for myself. The rest of the conversation went nowhere. No matter how hard I tried to explain my position or the sacrifices I'd made to reach this point, it was clear they weren't willing to see things from my perspective. They kept coming back to the idea that family should help each other, as if I was somehow failing them by refusing to hand over my savings. It was disheartening to realize just how set they were in their beliefs and how little they seemed to appreciate everything I'd done to get here. I left that conversation feeling drained, defeated, and honestly more confused than ever. For so long, I'd thought my parents were fair, understanding people. I believed that they'd respect my choices even if they didn't always agree with them. But this conversation showed me a different side of them, one that I'm struggling to reconcile with the parents I thought I knew. It's become clear that they see my achievements as something they're entitled to share in rather than something I've earned for myself. For now, I think it specifies step back, try to cool down. This whole experience has been more emotionally draining than I anticipated, and I need some space to process everything. I'm starting to realize that maybe my parents aren't as innocent in all of this as I once thought. Update 2. Unfortunately, things have taken a turn for the worse. I'd hoped that after my last conversation with my parents, we could let things cool down and maybe move past this issue. But it seems like they had other plans. Rather than stepping back or trying to understand my perspective, it looks like they've been busy telling their side of the story to everyone in our family. It all came to a head when one of my cousins who lives not too far from us decided to pay us a visit. He dropped by under the pretense of a casual check-in and we made small talk for a while, but then out of nowhere he brought up my sister, mentioning how she's having a tough time lately. He then started talking about how if he were in my shoes, he'd do whatever it took to help his sibling. I could tell he was trying to provoke a reaction, but I played it cool, waiting to see what he'd say next. Sensing I wasn't taking the bait, he got a bit more direct. He said that my parents had been telling everyone how hard they worked to raise me, putting all their energy and sacrifices into helping me achieve my dreams, only to end up with nothing in return. According to them, they never asked for much. But when they finally turned to me for help with my sister, I refused. My cousin went on about how they had apparently been telling everyone that my sister didn't get as much as I did growing up and how, in their view, she could use a little support from me. I was stunned. Not only had my parents spread their complaints to our relatives, but they'd also twisted the story, framing themselves as victims of my ingratitude. Apparently, I was the ungrateful son who'd gotten all the benefits and turned my back on my family the moment they needed me. Hearing my cousin say this, I felt a surge of anger but tried to keep my cool, knowing there was little point in defending myself to someone who already saw me as the villain. He kept going, bringing up how our family always believed in unity and that if I had the means to help, it was my responsibility to do so. I could tell he wasn't interested in my side of the story. He was just echoing what my parents had told him. I tried to steer the conversation away, but he was relentless, making it clear that he, along with several other relatives, believed I was wrong to withhold my success from my sister. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Apparently, my sister had also been telling everyone who would listen about her supposed abandonment. She's been going around saying that she took care of me her whole life, and now when she's struggling, her successful brother has turned his back on her. The way she's painted it, she's the loyal, selfless sister who's been wronged by a sibling who only cares about money. To make matters worse, I've started getting text messages from other relatives who rarely ever reach out. They've been sending me guilt-laden messages about how families should always come first, how we should always help each other, and some even suggested that I'd take a few years to help my sister and then get back to my retirement plan later. I didn't reply to any of them, but the messages kept coming, each one a painful reminder of just how distorted this whole situation had become. The betrayal I feel goes deep. It's not just about my parents and sister twisting the facts. It's about how they've turned the entire family against me to pressure me into giving up my retirement savings. All the hard work I've done, the years of planning and the sacrifices, none of it seems to matter to them. They don't see the years I spent sacrificing my time, energy and personal life. All they see is what they feel I owe them and my sister. What hurts the most is that my sister, instead of standing up for the truth, is actively feeding into this narrative. She knows that she's never supported me financially, and she knows that I've achieved everything on my own. But instead of being honest about it, she's happily playing the victim, stirring up pity among our relatives to pressure me into helping her. I honestly thought she'd have more integrity than this, but clearly I was wrong. Meanwhile, my wife has been incredibly supportive, but I can tell that this whole ordeal is taking a toll on her too. She's been my rock, standing by me and offering comfort, but even she's feeling the weight of the situation. My parents' remarks about her working to support my sister really upset her, though she's tried to brush it off. But it's painful for her to see me going through this, especially knowing that the people I trusted most are the ones causing me the most hurt. I feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare where no matter what I do I'm cast as the villain. If I stand my ground, my family will continue to see me as selfish and ungrateful, but if I give in, I'll be sacrificing everything I've worked so hard to build, not just for myself but for my wife and our future together. It feels like a lose-lose situation and the pressure is relentless. At this point, I just want this drama to end. The constant guilt-tripping, the messages, the whispers behind my back, it's wearing me down. I've spent years working hard to build a life I'm proud of, and now it feels like my family is trying to tear it all apart. I don't know what else to do, but for now I think the best thing is to keep my distance from the people who've made it clear they don't have my best interests at heart. Update 3. Hi. First off, I just want to thank each and every one of you for all the responses and support you've shown me. Reading your comments and advice made me realize I wasn't alone in this, and honestly, it kept me grounded through everything. It's comforting to know that so many people have my back. This whole mess with my family has been exhausting. But I felt like I owed you all one last update. So here we go. For a while, I tried my best to ignore all the family drama. I thought maybe if I didn't engage, they'd eventually get the message and stop. I ignored the constant texts and guilt-tripping messages from relatives. But as the days went on, it felt like they were only ramping up. The pressure became unbearable, and I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I paid a surprise visit to my parents' place, ready to confront them directly. To my surprise and irritation, my sister was there as well. The moment I walked in, I could see the smug looks on their faces. They were all sitting in the living room looking so self-satisfied, as if they believed I was finally coming around to their demands. They clearly thought I was there to hand over the money they'd been harping on about. And honestly, that assumption alone made my blood boil. Without giving them much of a chance to start their usual lecture, I jumped right in. I told them exactly what I thought about their behavior, and I didn't hold back. I laid it all out, from their manipulative guilt-tripping with the relatives to their ridiculous entitlement over my hard-earned savings. I told them that what they had done with the relatives wasn't just petty. It was ignorant and downright pathetic. I reminded them that whatever support they gave me as a kid was the bare minimum of what any decent parent would do. Every parent is supposed to look out for their child, make sure they're safe and provide a nurturing environment. That's just the basic responsibility of having kids, not some favor that needs to be repaid. The idea that they sacrificed so much for me felt insulting, especially when they acted like raising me was something exceptional. Then I turned to my sister. She looked uncomfortable, but I didn't let that stop me. I asked her point blank when she had ever taken care of me. Was it during all the time she was spending on designer suits, gadgets and lavish parties? Or maybe when she was blowing through money on trips to Vegas and Miami? I reminded her of the time I had approached her in my 20s with a business idea, looking for just a little support or guidance. She scoffed at me then, telling me my dream was too big and that I'd never pull it off. I'd been hurt then, but I'd taken it as motivation to work even harder. I looked at all three of them and told them that this entire situation wasn't my fault. My parents had decided to send my sister to an extremely expensive private school, knowing full well the financial strain it would put on them. I wasn't the one pushing them into debt. It was her recklessness that had put them in this mess. My parents had enabled her lifestyle, and now that she'd bit off more than she could chew, they wanted me to clean up her mess. I told them that their so-called golden child had made her choices, and she'd have to live with the consequences. If they'd come to me with kindness and respect, maybe even ask for a loan, I might have considered it, but to demand my savings as if they owed me or had some right to the life I've built? Not a single chance. At this point, my mom and my sister started shedding tears, acting like they were devastated by my refusal to help the family. My mom went on about how they never meant to offend me and that they just needed my support. She kept calling my sister a failed prodigy who just needed a little help to get back on her feet, as if that would justify everything they'd done. Watching them, I realized just how manipulative they'd become. My mom's pleas, my sister's sob story, it was all an act, a way to guilt me into giving them what they wanted. The whole thing felt like a sad rehearsed script. It was clear they had no remorse for how they treated me, only regret that their scheme hadn't worked out as they'd hoped. I didn't waste another minute there. I told them one last time that I wouldn't be giving them or my sister a single penny, that they'd made their bed and would have to lie in it. Then I walked out and didn't look back. I knew I'd made the right choice, but the experience still left a bitter taste in my mouth. It was heartbreaking to realize that my own family could stoop so low. Since that day, I've completely cut them off. I blocked my parents, my sister and all the relatives who had sided with them or tried to guilt-trip me. Some of them eventually got word of what happened and reached out to apologize, but by then it was too little too late. I didn't need their apologies or empty words. I needed peace, and that meant moving forward without them in my life. My wife has been incredible through all of this. We both knew we needed some time away to clear our heads, so we decided to take a little getaway. We've been relaxing, enjoying each other's company and just soaking up the relief of finally being free from all that toxic drama. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. And for the first time in weeks, I feel genuinely at peace. Looking back, I don't regret my decision one bit. My parents and sister made their choices and I've made mine. I won't be guilted or manipulated into giving up the life I've worked so hard to build, especially not for people who see me as nothing more than a source of cash. My wife and I are focusing on our future now, and I'm incredibly grateful to have someone by my side who truly cares about me rather than what I can give them.